Good afternoon, everyone. At the 10:30 Mass, which was Father Miller's last Sunday Mass among us, he made a claim during his homily about me which was not true. Of course, that's no surprise, is it? He claimed that last night we had a dinner together, which we did, all the priests and our transitional deacon, Deacon Lonergan, and he called it the Last Supper. And he told the people at the 10:30 Mass that I said to him, before the cock crows 3 times, you will deny that you know me. And I didn't say that. What I said was something else that the Lord said at the Last Supper. I turned to him and I said, I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. But we have truly been blessed to have had Father Miller among us, and I have some good news for you. No, it's not that he's going to be staying. Right. Unfortunately, he will be leaving this Tuesday, and Father Izaki will be coming. And we certainly want to say farewell to him after Mass today. He told me yesterday, he did say this, he said, yeah, probably only one person will show up. So we want to prove him wrong. But actually the good news that I have to share with you is something from our Gospel. And I think it's apropos to this Sunday as we say goodbye to Father Miller, as Father Tolentino makes his transition to his new status as resident and his new ministry, and as we begin to welcome a new assistant pastor and welcome our new permanent deacon, Deacon Snyder, and our new transitional deacon. In these times of change, it's very important for us to hear the good news that God can be trusted. God can be trusted. You know, He's able to do anything. At the beginning of time, He was able to create something, everything as a matter of fact, out of nothing. Theologians say that this is the ex nihilo creation of God, from nothing. He's able to make something out of nothing. We know from the Scriptures that the Lord makes the deaf hear, the dumb speak, the lame walk. And the message, I think, for us today that's found in our Scripture readings is that even if we hit bottom, if we feel as though there's nothing left for us, if indeed we think that we're in the midst of all darkness, we're confused, and in these times of changing, we don't know what the Lord is doing, trust Him, for He can bring something even out of nothing. This ultimately is the virtue of hope. Hope is described by the Catechism of the Catholic Church as that confident expectation of divine blessing. Let me repeat that. Hope is confident expectation of divine blessing. We know that God will bless us no matter what. No matter what. Now let's take a look at our Scripture readings. The first reading was an Old Testament reading from the first book of Kings, chapter 17. In order to understand the passage that we heard, that John read, we have to understand a little bit of the backstory. You see, the prophet Elijah lived through a 3-year drought in the land of Israel. He was told by God to go outside of the confines of the land of Israel to the town of Zarephath. And there you will find a widow and her son. Precisely there, Elijah, you will be taken care of by me. So he goes to Zarephath. He finds the widow, and she's gathering some sticks, some wooden sticks to make the last little fire, she says, in order to make her last meal. And then she says, I and my son will die. This widow reached the end of her rope. She was in utter darkness, had given up hope. And the prophet Elijah comes along and says, no. Put your trust in God. Make me, as well as you and your son, a little cake of bread. And I promise you that your flour jar and your jug of oil will not grow empty and dry. It happens. For an entire year, she is able to care for her son and for the prophet Elijah in her own home. But now, in the passage that we heard, her son becomes ill and dies. At this moment, she again loses faith. She's at the end of her rope, in the midst of darkness and anxiety. Her one and only son is no longer with her. So she turns to the prophet Elijah, and we heard her say in that first reading, "Why have you done this to me, O man of God? Have you come to me to call attention to my guilt and to kill my son?" She, like we at times, have reached a moment of despair, a moment of anxiety, our lack of trust. Once again, however, Elijah says to her, "Put your trust in God. Give me your son." So he takes the dead body of her son, goes up to his room, which is on the top floor, lays him out on his own bed, and prays to God for a miracle. He pleads with the Almighty to make the son arise. God answers his prayer. The son lives. Then we find in our gospel something very, very similar. Jesus himself is walking toward a town called Nain, and he notices a funeral procession. Another widow has lost her one and only son. He tells those bearing the body of the dead son, "Stop." He touches the platform, the bier, and he says, "Young man, I tell you, arise." You see, Jesus doesn't have to ask God. He doesn't have to pray to God. He is God. So he is able, unlike Elijah, to give a simple command. Jesus himself is life. Jesus himself is hope. And so in the midst of darkness and despair and anxiety, and when people reach the end of their rope, he's able to say, "Young man, I tell you, arise." This communicates to us that at those moments in which it seems as though God is silent, as though he no longer cares for me, it's precisely at that moment in which we should not surrender our hope. Remember, God can create something even out of nothing. St. Augustine, when he reflected on this passage of the raising of the son of the widow of Nain, he said, we have to keep in mind that in the gospel we find just 3 people that Jesus visibly raised from the dead. But, Augustine observes, he has raised thousands invisibly from the dead. And so, when you and I feel dead, tired, and discouraged, when we sense that we are dead, lonely, and afraid, when we are dead, desperate, and confused, remember the one who has raised invisibly thousands, raising us from hopelessness to hope. When you and I are on our last leg at the end of our rope, maybe moving in the wrong direction, the message today is clear. Don't give up on God. God can bring us back. God has the power to create our life anew. God is our hope. So from that rock bottom, and maybe there's someone out here today, maybe it's you, who are like the widow of Zarephath, like the widow of Nain, desperate, on the wrong path. in a hopeless situation, recall the message of today. We have a God who creates from nothing, the God who can raise from the dead, the God who is our hope. This is truly good news.